All right, listeners, ready to dive deep into some brain science?
Always.
Well, get this. We've got this research article straight from PNAS, Dynamic Tuning of Neural Stability for Cognitive Control. And it's all about how our brains can, hold on to information, but still be flexible enough to update it.
Fascinating.
Right. So, how do we learn new things without forgetting the old?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Well, this research might just have the answer, and get this. They found this tiny 70-millisecond delay in the prefrontal cortex, that executive control center of our brain.
The prefrontal cortex, yeah. So there's this tiny pause between when the brain reacts to something new and when it actually integrates it.
70 milliseconds. I mean, that doesn't sound like a lot, but in brain time, is that like an eternity? What's even happening in that little gap?
That's exactly what's so interesting about it, right? It suggests there's something more going on than just a simple input-output.
Right.
So to figure this out, these researchers, they designed a really cool experiment with monkeys.
With monkeys?
Yeah, they had them do this task where the rules kept changing. Imagine having to relearn how to play a video game, but midway through.
Oh, that's frustrating.
Yeah, totally. So these monkeys are trying to figure out the rules to get a reward.
Oh, okay.
And the scientists are watching their brains in action.
So how do you even start to decode what's happening in a monkey's brain? That's going to be incredibly complex.
It is. So what they did was they focused on this prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
And they were recording the activity of all these neurons while the monkeys were learning and adapting to these new rules.
Right.
And when they analyzed this data, there was this fascinating pattern that emerged. Instead of just changing smoothly, the neural activity seemed to kind of drift around a stable point, which represented the known rule, and then all of a sudden it would just shift when the rule changed, like a mental update.
Okay, so imagine this. You're holding a bowl, and there's a ball rolling around inside. That ball is the monkey's understanding of the rule, relatively stable. But then someone comes along and morphs the bowl into a totally different shape.
I like that.
So the ball has to adjust to this new terrain. Is that kind of what's happening in the monkey's brain?
That's a fantastic analogy because the brain needs a way to be stable, to hold on to this learned information,
right,
but also flexible enough to adjust when the rules change.
It has to roll with the punches.
Exactly. And that's what the researchers are calling dynamic stability.
Dynamic stability. So it's like having your cake and eating it too.
I like that.
But how does the brain actually do this?
That's where it gets even cooler. They used a type of artificial intelligence called a recurrent neural network, RNN.
RNN.
Yeah, and think of an RNN like a simplified version of the brain, a network that learns by connecting information.
So they basically built a computer program that could learn the same way the monkey did.
Pretty much, and it was wild what it showed.
So what did this computer brain tell them about dynamic stability?
Well, the RNN actually revealed a possible mechanism for this whole thing. They're calling it the branching channel.
Okay.
And you can kind of think of it like a railway switch in the brain, allowing it to move from one stable state, one rule, to a totally different one, representing the updated rule.
So in that split second, the brain's choosing which track of information to follow.
Exactly. And the timing of this switch, you guessed it, 70 milliseconds.
That's incredible. It's really amazing because this research suggests this dynamic stability thing. It's not just some quirk of monkey brains.
So you're saying we've all got these little branching channels in our heads.
It's likely a fundamental principle of how all our brains learn and adapt.
Yeah. But wait, wouldn't a faster brain be better? Why even have that delay? That 70 millisecond delay, it's not a sign of being inefficient. It's actually super important for decision making.
Oh, okay, I see.
Think about it. If our brains updated with every single piece of new information, we'd be all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Constantly changing our minds, flitting from one thought to the next. We wouldn't be able to hold on to any train of thought.
So that delay is kind of like a filter then. It gives our brains time to figure out is this new info actually important?
Exactly. It lets us be stable and flexible at the same time, kind of like driving a car, right?
Okay. I can see that you got to stay on course, but also be ready to react to anything.
Precisely. That little delay gives you that time to process and make the right adjustments.
This whole idea of dynamic stability, though, it seems so abstract. How does this actually work in our everyday lives?
Okay, let's take learning a new language, for example.
Okay.
So you start out learning the basic rules, grammar and vocabulary, right? That's your initial stable state, your bowl. But then as you start to encounter new words, more complex grammar, Your brain needs to incorporate all of that without just like dumping everything you already learned.
Right, right. So the bowl kind of like morphs and reshapes as you get more fluent.
Exactly. And that 70 millisecond delay, it's probably happening like countless times as your brain adjusts to these new like linguistic landscapes.
Wow, that's crazy. So that's the mechanism that allows us to like keep building on what we know without getting totally thrown off by every new thing we learn.
Exactly.
Okay, now here's what I'm really curious about. Could this research help us understand why some people seem to learn faster than others?
That's one of the really exciting possibilities that this research opens up.
Yeah.
It could be that there are individual differences in like brain dynamics, how fast and efficient these branching channels are operating, and that could play a role in how quickly we learn and how adaptable we are.
So if we could figure out how those branching channels work in different people, we could almost personalize learning, like tailoring a workout for your brain. That would be amazing.
And think about AI, artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
If we can understand how the brain balances stability and flexibility, we could build AI systems that learn and adapt in a way more human-like way.
So instead of just spitting out the same old responses, AI could actually learn from experience, solve problems, maybe even come up with new ideas.
It's mind-blowing, and this research gives us a real solid framework for starting to explore those possibilities.
Wow, so we're moving beyond just observing what the brain does to actually understanding how it works.
Exactly, at a mechanistic level.
This is way more than just some cool study about monkeys getting juice.
Right.
We're talking about breakthroughs in how we understand learning intelligence, maybe even consciousness itself.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest questions this research raises is this is dynamic stability, a universal principle of brain function.
What do you mean?
Well, the study focused on the prefrontal cortex, right?
Yeah.
But could this same mechanism be at play in other parts of the brain too?
Hold on. Are you saying that this dynamic stability thing might be happening all over our brains, not just in the part that makes decisions? Could it be the key to understanding how we process emotions, memories, even our senses?
That's precisely what researchers are now trying to figure out.
My brain is officially doing dynamic stability gymnastics over here.
It's pretty amazing stuff, right?
But before we get too carried away, let's bring it back to our listener. What's the one thing you want them to walk away really thinking about?
I think one of the biggest takeaways here is how important context is for our brains.
Context?
Yeah, like remember in that monkey experiment, the visual cue, it was like a contextual cue, right? It helped them figure out what was going to happen.
Okay.
Well, our brains use context all the time to make decisions and to update what we know.
So it's not just about like the new information itself, it's how it fits into the bigger picture. So like my brain might react totally differently to the same news depending on if I'm reading it in like a science journal or hearing it from a friend.
Exactly. Our brains are always like putting together information within a certain context. Think about it, how you might react to a compliment differently depending on who gives it to you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Your past experiences, your mood, the environment around you, all of that influences how your brain interprets things.
It's kind of like we're all detectives.
Yeah.
Our brains are always looking for clues to help us understand what's going on.
I like that. And it shows that our brains aren't just these fixed things. They're dynamic, constantly changing and adapting to new experiences.
This whole deep dive has been like a reminder of how incredible our brains really are.
It is, isn't it?
This 70 millisecond delay, the branching channels, dynamic stability. It's like we've unlocked a secret code for how we learn.
And the crazy thing is we're only just beginning to understand it.
Yeah.
There's still so much we don't know, but research like this gives us a glimpse into just how complex and powerful our brains are.
Before we wrap up, I have to ask, all this research is super fascinating, but can it actually help people in like a practical way?
Definitely. I think understanding dynamic stability could change the way we think about education and learning.
Okay, how so?
Imagine being able to design learning environments that are optimized for brain adaptability or creating personalized learning programs based on someone's brain dynamics.
Wow. So instead of having this one-size-fits-all approach to learning, we could have a system that's as dynamic as the brain itself.
That's the idea.
That's incredible.
It really is, and it's just one example of how powerful this research could be.
Well, I think you've given our listener a lot to think about. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Just encourage everyone to embrace that flexibility and adaptability in their own brains.
Yeah.
Stay curious, keep learning, and never stop exploring new things. You might be surprised at what your brain can do.
That's great advice. So to our listener, congrats on finishing this deep dive into dynamic neural stability. Hopefully you're walking away with a new appreciation for the amazing machine inside your head.
And remember, this is an ongoing journey. There's always more to learn. Keep asking questions and keep exploring.
Until next time, happy deep diving.